My name is Stephanie. I'm 29 years old. For 4 years, I was my grandfather's daily caregiver. When he had a stroke, my aunt told the hospital I was unstable and had me banned from the ICU. She went on a family trip. He died alone, asking for me by name 3 times. The nurses wrote it all down. I had no idea until I read his medical records. He was my grandfather Frank, the man who raised me. The woman who blocked me from his deathbed was his own daughter, my Aunt Pamela. She called me unstable, then left for a vacation. The nurse's notes proved he asked for me by name. But that was just the beginning. What his will revealed about her, and about his final wishes, exposed a family secret he'd been guarding for years. To understand what was in those records, you have to understand who my grandfather was to me. Frank Delgado, 78 years old. A retired civil engineer who built bridges across half the state. His hands were always stained with ink and dirt from his workshop. But the most important thing he ever built was the life I had with him. My grandmother died when I was 25. I had just finished graduate school, and the plan was to stay with him for a few months to help him get back on his feet. That few months turned into 4 years. I became his daily caregiver. I managed his medications, cooked his meals, drove him to every appointment. We had a rhythm. Coffee at 7, the morning news, his stories about building the Morrison Bridge. He had this old leather recliner where he'd sit and tell me about my dad, who died when I was 12, and about my grandmother, and about all the things he still wanted to see. I knew his medication schedule better than my own name. I knew which blanket he liked when his arthritis flared up. I knew the exact way he took his tea, 1 sugar, no milk, and it had to be hot enough to sting. He told me once, "Steph, you're the only one who sees me, not the old man, not the patient, me." Then there was my Aunt Pamela, his only surviving child now that my dad was gone. She lived 2 states away and visited exactly twice a year, Thanksgiving and his birthday, if she wasn't too busy. But on social media, she was the devoted daughter. Her captions were full of hashtag family first and hashtag caregiver life, even though she hadn't lifted a finger in 4 years. She saw my grandfather as an asset, not a person. She'd already started asking about his will at Christmas dinners, laughing it off like a joke, but no one was laughing. On March 12th, my grandfather had a massive stroke. I was the one who found him on the kitchen floor. I rode in the ambulance. I held his hand in the emergency room while they ran scans. I was listed as his healthcare proxy. He'd signed that paperwork 2 years earlier with his lawyer because he said Pamela would pull the plug to get to the inheritance faster. Those were his words. He was moved to the ICU that night. Then Pamela flew in the next morning. Within 3 hours of arriving, she had told the nursing staff that I was emotionally unstable, that I had been overmedicating him, that I was a threat to his recovery. She told them I didn't want to visit, that I was too distraught and she'd handle everything. The hospital removed me from the approved visitor list. I showed them my healthcare proxy paperwork, but Pamela was next of kin, and she was so convincing, so reasonable, so calm. The nurses had no reason to doubt her. I called the hospital every day, begging to be let in. Every day, they said no. Pamela told me over text that he was stable, that I should just rest and she'd take it from here. Then she sent a photo of herself at the airport. She'd gone on her family trip anyway. She said he was fine, the nurses had it under control. 4 days after his stroke, my grandfather died alone in that ICU bed. I wasn't there. She wasn't there. He died while his daughter was at a resort, and his granddaughter, who had cared for him every single day for 4 years, was barred from his side with a lie. A week after the funeral, I drove to the hospital medical records office. I was still his legally designated healthcare proxy. By law, they had to give me his file. The woman behind the counter handed over a thick manila envelope. I sat in my car in the parking lot, hands shaking, and I opened it. Inside were the visitor logs, the nursing notes, every conversation documented shift by shift. And that's when I saw the 3 entries that broke me wide open. The first entry was dated March 13th, the day after he was admitted. Shift change at 7 p.m. The nurse wrote, patient alert and oriented, asked for granddaughter Stephanie by name. States, where is Steph? She is always here, something is wrong. The nurse noted that a visitor, identified as daughter Pamela, told staff that Stephanie had been informed but didn't want to see him like this and had chosen not to come. That was a lie. I had called the nurse's station at 6:30 that same evening, crying, begging for an update. They said I wasn't on the list. The second entry was March 14th, the day Pamela boarded her flight. She stopped by the ICU at 9 in the morning, stayed 22 minutes according to the visitor log. The nurse wrote, patient repeatedly asked for Stephanie. Daughter stated, she's too unstable to be here, she can't handle it. Then at 9:22, the log shows Pamela signed out and left the hospital. She went directly to the airport. Her flight departed at 11:45. My grandfather spent the entire day wondering where I was while his daughter was ordering a mimosa at 30,000 feet. The third entry was March 15th, his final day. Nurse recorded at 3 in the afternoon. Patient increasingly distressed. Asks, did Steph get my message? Tell her I need her, tell her I love her. The nurse wrote that she attempted to contact the listed family member, Pamela, but there was no answer. My aunt had her phone off at the resort. That note was written at 3:06 p.m. My grandfather died at 4:42 p.m. I was sitting in my apartment 6 miles away, staring at my phone, waiting for a permission that was never coming. I read those entries over and over, my tears smearing the ink. He died thinking I had abandoned him, the one person who had fought for him every single day for 4 years, and in his final hours he believed I didn't care enough to show up. Pamela constructed that reality. She walked into that hospital weaponized trust and stole the last moments I could have had with the man who raised me. But here's the thing that made my blood run cold. The records didn't just show her lies. They showed something far more calculated. When I cross-referenced the visitor log with his admission paperwork, I found the initial intake form. On it, the nurse had annotated next of kin and contact restrictions. Next to my name, Stephanie, there was a handwritten note, removed per daughter's request. Suspect erratic behavior. Patient safety concern. She didn't just ban me. She planted a flag that would follow me to every nurse's station, every shift change, every doctor's rounds. She made sure that even if I tried to fight my way back in, I'd be viewed as a threat to my own grandfather's well-being. I sat in that parking lot for 2 hours, piecing together the timeline. She had flown in at 8 a.m. on March 13th. By 11 a.m., she had me removed. By 2 p.m. the next day, she was gone. She spent exactly 29 hours with her dying father. 29 hours, and she used that time not to comfort him, but to isolate him. I called his best friend, Arthur, the only person besides me who had visited him weekly. Arthur is 79 years old, a Korean War veteran, sharp as a tack. When I told him what I'd found, he went silent for a long time. Then he said, Steph, I visited him the morning he died. I wasn't on the list either, but they let me in because I made a scene. He kept looking at the door. He kept asking why you weren't there. I told him you loved him more than anything in this world, and he said, I know, but I need to hear her voice. Arthur's voice cracked. He said, Pamela was there earlier that day. She told me you were having a breakdown and refused to come. I didn't believe her. He told me he had asked the nurses to call me, but they said it was against protocol. Arthur wasn't the only one. I started calling around the neighbors, the physical therapist who had come to the house twice a week, the pharmacist who delivered his prescriptions. Every single one of them told me the same thing. Pamela had called or texted, spinning a story that I was losing it, that I needed space, that she was stepping in to protect him from me. She had constructed an entire narrative behind my back, and I didn't know until he was already gone. Then I opened the second half of the envelope. It contained his advance directives, the healthcare proxy form I already had a copy of, and one more document I wasn't expecting. It was a transfer on death deed, dated 18 months earlier, leaving his lake cabin directly to me. No probate, no family court, no contest. He had signed it with his lawyer the same month Pamela had asked him about his will at Christmas dinner. In the margin of the document, in his own shaky handwriting, he had written, for Stephanie, in case the family got difficult. He knew. He had known for years exactly who his daughter was, and he had quietly built a wall around the one thing he wanted me to have. I held that deed in my hands and realized that my grandfather had been protecting me even from the grave. But the grief was still there, raw and consuming. I had the records, the proof, the truth. Now I had to decide what to do with it. The funeral was in 3 days. The entire family would be there. And I would be standing in a room full of people who had heard Pamela's version of the story, looking at the woman who had robbed my grandfather of his final moments, and me of my goodbye. That was the moment I knew the hardest conversation of my life was waiting for me at the repast, and I had no idea what would happen when I walked through that door. The funeral was held on a gray Thursday morning at the little chapel on Willow Street. Frank had requested no pomp, no long eulogies, just a quiet service and a gathering afterwards. My grandmother was buried there, and he had insisted on being beside her. I sat in the third row, not the front. Pamela had claimed the first pew, flanked by her husband and her 2 sons. She was wearing a black dress and a carefully composed expression of grief that looked rehearsed in every mirror she passed. The pastor who had known Frank for 30 years spoke about his kindness and his quiet strength. He mentioned the bridge projects, the way he'd taught Sunday school decades ago, his love for his late wife. He thanked the family for their devotion. When he got to the part about Frank's last days, he said, "It's a comfort to know he was surrounded by those who loved him most." I gripped the edge of the pew so hard my fingers went numb. Across the aisle, Arthur caught my eye. He shook his head slightly, a signal of shared outrage that no one else in that room could read. After the burial, we moved to the church fellowship hall for the repast. Folding tables, cold-cut platters, coffee urns. The room filled with relatives I hadn't seen in years, neighbors, the pharmacist, the mail carrier. Pamela was holding court near the dessert table, accepting condolences like she was the widow. I heard her say, "It was so peaceful at the end." I was right there with him. That was the moment I stopped shaking and started moving. I had made copies of the nursing notes and the visitor log. I'd highlighted the 3 entries where Frank asked for me. I walked to a table near the corner where my cousin Maria and my uncle Tom, my father's youngest brother, were sitting. I set the papers down without a word. Maria looked at them, then looked at me. As she read, her expression shifted from confusion to shock to something like rage. "She said you refused to visit," Maria whispered. "That is not what the nurses wrote." Tom leaned over and read through the other notes. I told them about the intake form, the note about me being unstable, the way she'd planted the story with the hospital staff. I told them Arthur had visited and heard Frank ask for me. Before I could finish, Arthur himself walked over, put a hand on my shoulder, and said loud enough for the next table to hear, "I was there the morning he passed." He kept looking at the door, asking why Steph wasn't with him. I told him you loved him, he knew, but he wanted to hear your voice. That woman told me you'd had a breakdown and refused to come. I never believed it, but I didn't know how to get hold of you. I should have tried harder. His voice broke. He died thinking you didn't want to be there. She did that. The words hung in the air like a siren. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. Pamela, across the room, froze mid-sentence. Her composure flickered, then she recovered and started walking toward us, her heels clicking on the linoleum. "What is this, Stephanie?" she said, her voice sweet but edged. "Making a scene at your grandfather's funeral? I know you're grieving, but this isn't the place." I didn't shout, I didn't cry. I just handed her the highlighted pages. She glanced at them and I saw it, a micro-expression of pure panic before she forced calm. "These are hospital notes, probably written by some overworked nurse who got confused. You're twisting this to make yourself the victim. I was protecting him, you were falling apart, I had to do what was best for my father." Tom stood up. "Pamela, the nurses wrote down exactly what he said. He asked for Stephanie by name. 3 times. You told them she didn't want to come. You told the whole hospital she was unstable. And then you got on a plane to Cancun while he was dying. That's not protection, that's abandonment." The room erupted. My aunt's sons looked bewildered. Her husband grabbed her arm and tried to pull her toward the exit, but she yanked free. "You don't know the whole story," she hissed. "Frank was confused. He didn't know what he was saying. I did what I thought was right. And if you all want to believe this unstable girl over me, his own daughter," Maria held up her phone. "I just checked the visitor log. It timestamps your arrival and departure. You were in the ICU for 29 hours total. You left the day before he died and never came back. The log shows you signed out at 9:22 a.m. on March 14th. His time of death was 4:42 p.m. on the 15th. You weren't there. She wasn't allowed to be there. He died alone. Alone." That word landed like a physical blow. I saw several people wipe their eyes. The pharmacist, Mr. DeLuca, who had known my grandfather for 2 decades, stepped forward. "I delivered his medications for 4 years," he said. "Every week, Stephanie was the one who answered the door, who asked questions about side effects, who made sure he took everything correctly. Not once did I see you, Pamela, not once." She was cornered and she knew it, but she had one more card to play. "This is all very dramatic," she said, straightening her dress. "But the reality is, the estate will go through probate. Frank's will is old from before all this. As next of kin, I'll be handling that. The lake cabin, which has been in our family for generations, will go to the rightful heirs, not to some girl who manipulated an old man into feeling guilty." I pulled the transfer on death deed from my bag. I had made a copy for moments like this. I didn't wave it, I just held it out. "He signed this 18 months ago," I said. "It's a transfer on death deed for the cabin, directly to me, no probate, no contest. It's legally airtight." His handwriting is in the margin. He wrote, "For Stephanie in case the family got difficult." He knew Pamela, he knew exactly who you were, and he protected me from you before you even had a chance to hurt me. The silence that followed was absolute. My aunt's face drained of color. She stared at the document, and for the first time I saw genuine fear in her eyes, not fear of exposure, but fear of losing what she'd assumed was hers. Her husband finally managed to pull her toward the door. As she left, she turned and said, "This isn't over, you'll regret this." But her voice was hollow. The room exhaled around me, a dozen relatives murmuring apologies, asking how this had happened, promising to make things right. I felt no triumph. Only a bone-deep exhaustion and the quiet, steady presence of my grandfather's love, finally set free from the lies. As the crowd slowly dispersed, Arthur sat down beside me. He took my hand and said, "He'd be proud of you, kid. But you need to know something else. That cabin isn't just a cabin. Frank used to tell me that when he was gone, he wanted you to have the one place where you could always feel him. There's a box in the attic, something he put there years ago. He said you'd find it when you were ready. I think it's time." That was the moment I realized my grandfather's message to me wasn't finished. And the next chapter was waiting in a dusty attic at the edge of a lake he loved more than anywhere on earth. I drove to the lake the next morning. The cabin is 2 hours north, tucked into a curve of the shoreline where the water laps against a dock my grandfather built with his own hands. The key was still under the loose stone by the back steps, exactly where he'd always kept it. The air inside smelled of cedar and old books, and the faint trace of his pipe tobacco, a scent I had thought I'd never breathe again. The attic ladder creaked when I pulled it down. Dust swirled in the light from a single bare bulb. Against the far wall, beneath a stack of blueprints from his bridge projects, sat a wooden box I had never seen before. It was simple pine with brass hinges, and on the lid, carved in his handwriting, were the words, "For Stephanie with all my love." I carried it downstairs, set it on the kitchen table, and opened the lid. Inside were letters, all addressed to me, sealed and dated. The top envelope was marked with a sticky note. "Read this one first." I tore it open with trembling fingers. The date at the top was October 15th, 2 years before he died. He wrote, "My darling Stephanie, if you're reading this, then my time has come. I hope you are sitting at this very table, with the sun on the water the way I always loved. I asked Arthur to remind you of this box when the moment was right. I knew there were things that would need to be said after I was gone, things I wanted you to hear in my own words, even if I could no longer be there to say them." I pressed my palm against my mouth and kept reading. The letter went on for 4 pages. He told me that from the day I moved in after my grandmother passed, he had watched me become the woman he always knew I could be. He wrote about the small things I thought no one noticed, how I always cut his toast diagonally because my grandmother used to, how I learned his favorite news channel and had it on before he woke up, how I held his arm when we walked to the mailbox so he wouldn't feel unsteady. "You gave me years of dignity," he wrote. "You gave me the gift of being seen as a man, not a burden. No doctor, no nurse, no family member ever did what you did. You loved me back to life every morning." Then he turned to the harder truth. "Pamela has been asking about my estate for years. She thinks I don't notice the questions disguised as concern. I have always known her heart, Stephanie. It broke mine, but I have long since made peace with it. What I would not make peace with was the thought that after I'm gone, she might find a way to hurt you, so I took precautions." He referred to the transfer on death deed, which I already had, but then he added something I never expected. "Underneath these letters, you will find a cassette tape. I recorded it the same week I signed the deed. It is nothing fancy, just an old man talking into a recorder. But if there ever comes a day when you need to hear my voice, if, God forbid, I am taken from you in a way that doesn't allow a proper goodbye, I want you to have it. Listen to it when you are ready. Know that everything I said on that tape, I also said out loud to the sky and the lake and the pines, so that the world would bear witness. You were the greatest blessing of my life." I set the letter down. My hands were shaking. I reached into the box and found the cassette, still in its plastic case, labeled in his shaky writing, "For Steph, play me." There was an old tape player beside the letters, its batteries replaced at some point, still functional. I pressed play. His voice filled the quiet cabin. "Stephanie, it's your grandpa. If you're hearing this, I want you to know. I love you more than words can carry. I always have. You are the daughter of my heart, even if not of my blood. And I want you to keep this cabin, this place of peace, for the rest of your life. Don't let anyone take it from you. Don't let anyone tell you that you don't belong here. This is your home, the same way you were my home for those 4 precious years." He paused, and I could hear him clear his throat, the way he used to when he was emotional. Then he said, "I know that when I go, there may be noise. Your aunt may try to rewrite the story. She may try to push you aside. Truth is written in 100 places, in the bridge cables that hold firm against the wind, in the foundation of this cabin, in the hearts of the people who truly know us. The truth is you, and I need you to hear me say out loud what I could not say in that hospital bed. Thank you. For every morning coffee, every bandaged cut, every laugh, every silence. You gave me a life worth living. I can go in peace knowing I was loved by you. The tape ended with the soft click of the recorder turning off. I sat there crying, the sound of his voice still hanging in the air. He had known. He had planned for the very cruelty that unfolded in that ICU, and he had made sure that even beyond the grave, his love would reach me unbroken. In the weeks that followed, the family fell into a new quiet. Pamela attempted to challenge the deed, but it was ironclad. She retreated into silence when her own lawyer told her there was nothing to fight. The rest of the family, the ones who mattered, made their own amends, not because I demanded it, but because the truth had been laid bare. Arthur and I now meet at the cabin every month. I found where my grandfather had planted a dogwood tree years ago, and I planted another beside it, a pink one, just as my grandmother would have wanted. The cabin is mine, as he intended, for life. But really, it was always ours. The man who asked for me by name and the granddaughter who will carry his love forward every single day she draws breath. He gave me a home not made of walls, but of memory and resilience and the quiet certainty that in the end, love is the one thing no lie can ever truly bury. Looking back, I realized that grief is not just about loss. It's about the stories we tell ourselves after someone is gone. My aunt told a story of a caregiver she called unstable. The hospital believed her. For a few days, that story was the only one that mattered. But my grandfather had written a different story. He wrote it in nursing notes he didn't know I'd read, in deeds he signed with a trembling hand, and on a cassette tape that carried his voice across the divide between life and death. The truth didn't erase the pain of those final hours when he asked for me and I wasn't there. But it did restore the thing Pamela tried hardest to destroy, the bond between a grandfather and the granddaughter who loved him. There are moments when the people we trust most can rewrite our narratives without our permission. When that happens, the only counterweight is evidence and the courage to share it. I could have stayed silent. I could have let my aunt's version become the family legend. Instead, I opened the envelope. I read the notes. I let my grandfather's own words speak for him when he could no longer speak for himself. Not everyone gets that chance. Not everyone has a grandfather who planned ahead, who knew the world was full of people who would try to rewrite love as something lesser. So I'll leave you with this. The next time someone tries to silence you, to tell the world you are something you're not, remember that the truth often lives in the details. In a logbook. In a margin note. In a voice that keeps speaking even after it's gone. And if you're lucky enough to have someone who loves you with that kind of foresight, hold on to them. Fight for them. And never let anyone else write the ending to your story. If this story moved you, please take a second to like and subscribe, and drop your location plus local time in the comments. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening right now. I'm Stephanie. This is the story of how my aunt banned me from my grandfather's ICU, and how his final words gave me back everything she tried to destroy.